things that's yet to come, and that we don't even know who the actual people who thrown their hat in the ring is involved. I think there's still a lot of discussion around that. And I think that right now what we're seeing is where, some members, they come in and they already have an established office and all these things. But for us, with the redistricting year, we're literally starting at scratch. And so my priority is on constituent outreach services and making sure that we're ready to answer the calls.
Just the way the founding fathers intended it. Now, you've served your country in uniform. You served in the civilian side. Now you served in Congress. I wanted to get your take on the trade for Brittany Griner for Victor Bout. I know a lot of people, everyone's happy that American Brittany Griner's home, but did Putin get the better end of this deal?
Well, absolutely he did. And he controlled the negotiation through the entire phase. I think that we've already established that since the failed Afghan botched withdrawal, that we have lost any type of credibility on the world stage. The China, Russia, Iran, North Korea geopolitical alignment continues to grow strength as a superpower as America continues to try and do what they can on their apology tour. I'm always happy anytime that we rescue any American or we save any American, we get any American home. Obviously, that's very important to us. But we should have never have actually been put in this position whereby Vladimir Putin and Russia controlled every element of this. There's two things that really concern me with this. One, I was part of the Trump administration where when we actually got Americans back, we didn't have to give anything in return. There was peace through strength and there was actually proper negotiations. Again, you're talking about the guy who is, art of the deal, right? So he understands negotiations better than others. But what I saw here was not only that we didn't push hard for veteran, Marine Paul Whelan or for another person who was there, who was an educator who was arrested in 2021 for a very similar thing for cannabis, Mark Vogel out of Pennsylvania. We didn't fight to ensure that every American came back. We prioritized celebrity status, identity politics, and what was going to give us the most kind of political optics bandstand for the left. That was what they focused on. They just traded a guy who's known as the Merchant of Death, a guy who's responsible for tens of thousands of genocidal murders that occurred in Africa and other places around the world, who's really a former GRU guy who was sent to language school. And if you wanted to really trace it back, he's most likely one of Vladimir Putin's arms dealers that helped to funnel billions of dollars into his own bank accounts. This is a guy who never should have seen the light of day. This is a guy that we never should have actually been willing to trade. But we also have to acknowledge the fact that what we've done is we've set a very, very dangerous precedent.
What's up, everybody? My name is Anthony Watson.
It's been expensive. You can go to www.givesandgo.com.
Powered by Turning Point USA called Campus Crashers, with a very special challenge for every single one of you that is just as passionate about the grassroots movement in Turning Point USA by starting a chapter.
But wait, hold on. How did they do that, though?
Well, it's simple. The best way to do that is text the word chapter to the number 71776, or if you're here at AmFest, see any person that works with Turning Point USA, and they will be more than excited to help you out.
Now, of course, if you start a chapter at your campus, we might just crash you.
Traumatic, and still is a traumatic experience for you. Just remind us everything that has transpired, because I do think it's interesting, because I think a lot of people thought you were going to go after them for defamation of character, what the Biden administration said about you, what mainstream media outlets said about you.
Well, I was down there at the riots, helping protect the community, putting out fires, helping people with medical assistance, and then I was ambushed by Mr. Rosenbaum, Joshua Zeminski, and several other people, and I was cornered. Mr. Rosenbaum tried to take my gun. I shot and defended my life. And then I was chased down again by a huge crowd of hundreds of people, stumbled to the ground by getting hit in the head with a skateboard and a rock. And then as I'm on the ground, I'm kicked in the face, hit in the head again with the skateboard by Mr. Huber. And then I defend myself from that threat. And then I'm attacked again by Mr. Grosskreutz, who points a pistol at my head.
Yeah. And they had the trial. You were found innocent. I remember watching that.
Well, it was a powerful moment.
It was such a powerful moment. But while all of this was going on, mainstream media outlets, shows like The View, Biden, they were
calling you a murderer, calling you a racist, calling you every name under the book. What is it? You're a young man. How old are you?
I'm 19, about to be 20.
19 years old. When this happened, you were how old?
19.
I was 17.
17 years old. What is that like to see your face plastered all over the media and the names you were being called?
I just didn't think somebody could, not look at the facts that closely. How can you be so ignorant to not watch the videos, look at the evidence, and then go out and call me a racist, white supremacist, vigilante, murderer. None of those are true, but they still did it. And then they doubled down after my trial. Look at Whoopi Goldberg. She called me a murderer and a white supremacist after I was acquitted. And that can't happen. These people need to be held accountable, and I'm going to hold them accountable.
And that's what you're talking about. And that's what I wanted to remind people when you were talking about the lawsuits.
So how did it come about? Because there was a big story. I think I even fell victim to it, of reading a headline someplace about you winning millions of dollars from The View. Where did that even come from? Do you remember that, Miranda? It was a few months ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised when you said that you didn't, because I thought you had already filed lawsuits and that you had won. So I was confused. So I'm glad you clarified that.
So that was actually an attack from the left-wing media to try to prohibit me from raising funds to defend this lawsuit I'm currently facing. So what this lawsuit is entailing, yes, you can get acquitted and you get your rights restored, but they're going to drain you in financial debt and be able to do these things and sue you and make you like, oh, am I going to defend myself? No, I'm going to get sued and then obliterated into debt.
It's amazing when you think about the tactics that the left uses, even going this far of coming up with a scheme like this that literally in many respects worked, because there are a lot of people that thought you walked away with millions and say, oh, well, Kyle's in good shape. We're happy. He turned out like Sandman and the church.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about.
And the Indians and the lawsuit that happened there.
Yeah.
But all that was false. That's the lengths that the left will go to. So what do you do now? Because you face this civil lawsuit, you're raising money. Is anybody helping you pro bono wise?
No, I'm having to pay all these civil lawyers. I have to pay them for all the work they do, and it's expensive, but they're really good.
I mean, you're only 19 years old. How are you affording this?
Through God helping me bring people in to donate money that are helping fight this lawsuit.
Wow, I can't even imagine 19 years old.
When you go back to that day, do you have regrets going? Do you say, I wish I never went?
Yeah.
How do you play that out when you look back at things?
Well, I mean, of course, I never wanted to take anybody's life, but I did what I had to do to survive.
Would you have gone again if you... Well, look, I don't want to say that. Do you regret going?
Because of the civil lawsuit, I'm not going to answer that because, they're going to use any word I say against me.
Yeah, and you're smart, and I shouldn't put you in that position to put you in harm's way that way. But, it's a scary thing, and you were well within your rights to have that firearm, too. Much to the dismay of the left. Somehow the left thinks gun rights ends for people, or really that it never begins for people. You were well within your rights in that state to be carrying that firearm, and the left wanted to ignore that part of the story as well.
Absolutely.
How is this? Because I'm just thinking, you're only 19 years old. This happened when you were 17. How has this changed you? And when you see what's going on around our country, where criminals are being let loose, criminals, and all these blue cities, left and right, crime rates up 100, 200, 300% in places like New York City, and what's happening to you. I'm just curious what your reaction is when you see that and how you've been treated and how this has changed your life.
Well, I mean, you look at the gun control stuff. Criminals are going to still get guns. That's not going to stop them. What it's going to stop is a good guy from going to legally obtaining a firearm. And crime rate's going to go up. People are going to start getting more injured and killed because of these left-wing politicians. I actually think we need to lower the age to 18 to 20 for pistols, because look at young college women. They're going on campuses, they're getting kidnapped, raped, and murdered, and they have no means to defend themselves. And I blame the left for that. I blame the left that they're pushing for these bans, high-capacity magazines, and that's their fault.
And when you think about two prosecutors, the Justice Department has become so corrupt in America. I related this to President Trump. There was a former U.S. attorney from the Southern District of New York talking about the team of special prosecutors that were going to prosecute President Trump, and they would never leave their jobs unless they thought there was going to be an indictment. Now, if you're a prosecutor, your job should not be to go seek an indictment. Your job should be to get to justice and the facts. You had a prosecutor that was so quick to indict you. They wanted to go after you. They refused to go after criminals. There was absolute lawlessness on the streets in Kenosha, Wisconsin, the night this went down. What did this do for your faith or lack of faith in the justice system? Now, in the end, it worked out for you, but in the beginning, it certainly didn't.
Well, I mean, this was a political prosecution. Thomas Binger, he knew he didn't have a case, and he still decided to come after me. He wasted taxpayers' money, and he took me to trial when it should never have gone to trial. And I think that's ridiculous, and I think it was a clear-cut case of self-defense.
This is what prosecutors do, Miranda. They get a philosophy or an idea in their head, and then by hook or by crook, they're going to get there. And so I'm telling you, if it can happen to Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old boy at the time, if it can happen to a sitting president of the United States, it can happen to any one of these people out here. It might not be a shooting. It might not be January 6th. Wait till they come after you for some minor income tax thing that they concoct on you because you're a conservative. They're pushing digital currency out there. They want us, and they will do anything they can to come after us. And I'm talking about conservatives right now.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the censorship with Elon Musk, what he's exposing, Charlie Kirk was blacklisted. A bunch of other conservatives were blacklisted on Twitter. They're preventing our voices from being heard, and soon they're going to take away our rights, and they're going to persecute us, and it's going to come. People are going to try to throw trials on us, and they're going to try to silence us, and they're going to try to take over the United States of America.
Has anything good come out of this for you?
I met a beautiful girl. I have a girlfriend.
Who's still getting ready?
Who's still getting ready?
She wants to look ready. I get it. It's a girl thing. Yeah, I get it. She must care about you. She wants to look good for you. I got it.
I've made a lot of great friends. Like I met you, Miranda, Charlie, Jack. I've met a lot of great Christians, a lot of great mentors who've kind of restored my hope in a way, and conservatorship and free speech, fighting for our rights and our voices to be heard.
You know, in many respects, and I'm sorry you had to find yourself in the position you did to get to the point where you are, but you're a real example for gun rights in America and what the left can do. And in many respects, I'm sure you walk this convention floor, you have people coming up to you and thanking you.
Yes.
That's got to be humbling.
Yes, it is. All the support, all the prayers, the kind letters and messages and the donations, everything. And then people just wanting to say thank you or pray. It's just so beautiful to see.
You know, let me ask you, we're here at AmericaFest, Turning Point event, Arizona, with everything you have going on now. You decided to be here. Why?
Because it's just filled with a bunch of great people. Everybody here is an amazing person. They have great values, and they want to fight for what's right. They want to fight for free speech and anti-censorship and the right things.
Yeah, I see real Americans over there nodding their head in agreement with you right now.
We have lots of them here.
You got quite the fan club right here.
Well,
you do.
Kyle Rittenhouse, I want to thank you for coming on today, and thank you for being here. Thank you for not just hiding after all of this, but for really using the situation to have something good come out of it. And I know it was a tragedy all the way around, but know that there is some good that has come out of this, and that's you as a strong voice for our rights.
And thank you for being on Real America's Voice. So how can people help you? Because you're still raising those funds. You can't do it alone, right? And so you need help. So where can people go?
You can go to www.givesendgo/Kyle Rittenhouse, the only platform that didn't shut me down at the initial beginning.
Yeah, awesome. Wow. Well, Kyle, thank you. It's always an amazing story, and I always it makes me emotional, Kyle, to hear your story every time I talk to you, because I can't imagine, one, I have a son, what it would be like to watch him go through that, and two, just the persecution of good people in this country is just rough to watch, which is why we fight, which is why Real America's Voice fights, which is why you fight, Miranda, which is why I fight, which is why everybody out there watching fights, and God bless you, brother.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Miranda.
God bless you.
Continue those prayers.
You know, there's somebody else who fights. I think if April has Senator Wendy Rogers from Arizona, who's been a real fighter in this state for election integrity, a lot of issues that we have, and she's standing over by with April Moss. And before Charlie Kirk starts to speak, we may have to cut them off, but I'd love to hear from Wendy Rogers, because we still had some more problems in Maricopa County, and what can be done about it finally.
That's right. You know, we're really honored to have Wendy Rogers here with us today. Thank you for stopping by. And, you know, you've been an expert on what's happening with the election and a strong fighter for Kari Lake. So tell us a little bit about what's going to be happening this next week.
Well, Merry Christmas, April. It's great to be here. You're here in Arizona where arguably history will be made next week in terms of restoring election integrity. This is the first time we've had standing. You've heard about election integrity being brought up in the courts all these past 24 months, and nothing's had standing. Now we have what I would call an aggrieved candidate, Kari Lake, who's a fighter, who's a warrior, who now has brought this fabulous, I think, 60, 70-page lawsuit forward in the court. And we have standing, there will be our day in court. We will have a 2-day trial next week.
It's a moment that America is waiting for, because we have seen and witnessed all of the corruption going on with the election from 2020. Midterms came around. We were more disappointed by just the losses that happened in the swing states. Arizona, one of the most important states in the entire nation, for what we're going to see move forward. And I'm believing it too, Wendy, that we're going to have a good turnout, a good report. Certainly, I think it was incredible that Kari Lake did something I haven't seen done before, and she had the video affidavits, the video testimonies of the people who were whistleblowing and saying, listen, this is what actually happened. I mean, I don't see how you could have a stronger case than that.
Well, here's the story. We have seen so many ways of the cheat now fully exposed. You have 200,000 ballots that were turned in at Runbeck, which is another whole storyline I just heard of today, where they have questionable ties to someone who's been recently nominated to be the Speaker-elect of our Arizona House. You have also these ballots that were sent with the wrong zip code and then brought back to the post office. You have all kinds of signature verification issues. Kari Lake is the first one who's fought back, is the first one who's had the legal team put together to elucidate all these ways of the cheat. The earlier mail-in ballots get sent, the more advance notice they know how much to cheat by.
It's so true. Well, all eyes will be on Arizona, and we're going to continue to keep an eye on that. I know Ben Bergquam has been following that lawsuit as well, and you know, we're excited to see what's going to happen in court. I think it's going to be live streamed, right? People can watch it?
I believe so. The Maricopa County Superior Court system is where you get that. And also, you have to understand, we had a 1916 court case that's over 100 years ago in Arizona, where a governor was seated and then months later unseated after it was adjudicated that the other individual won.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that has to... There are too many people that saw the crowds that Kari Lake brought. She won the hearts, not just of the people of Arizona, but across the country. People were inspired by Kari Lake, and a lot of people felt like finally we have somebody who's going to stand up to the cartels, who's going to stand up to a lot of the injustices we've been seeing, and really try to make those strides to protect our children. You know, she ran on a campaign about, you know, we want to put an end to the fentanyl and all of the drugs coming across the border. So, Wendy, thank you so much for joining us. We're really glad that you are a fighter as well. Kari's got a really strong team here in Arizona. We're blessed to be here in this beautiful state. So, I believe we're going to toss it back to Grant and Miranda, and we're still waiting for Charlie Kirk to take the stage.
Yes, we are running a few minutes behind. He was supposed to go on, I think, about 20 minutes ago.
Okay.
But that happens. You know, they have to
He's doing makeup and all that.
Yeah, he's getting ready with Rittenhouse's girlfriend, right? You know, it takes time.
Yes.
Yes. No, I'm
Yes.
not. Don't take that literally. That was a joke. That was a joke.
I think Charlie's married, and
yeah, he is married.
I'm sure
Happily
Kyle
married.
has complete faith in his girlfriend.
Yes, yes.
But you now have Charlie and Kyle Rittenhouse's girlfriend up getting ready together. Yeah.
I shouldn't have said that. After I said that, people are like, "What did she just say?" No, no. But Charlie's going to be kicking off the event here. Obviously, he is the founder of Turning Point USA. Again, we're here at AmericaFest.
And it really kicks off the event because, this event is about speakers, like many of the events are. It's also about friends getting together. It's about reunions. I know you're like me. I come in, there's people from all over the country that I don't get to see often, and then I get to see them at events like this. So there's a lot of that going on. But in the end, people come here because they want to hear what these speakers have to say. And as someone who has spoken at events like this, it's a really difficult task because you have so many speakers. We all know the issues. Everyone out there knows the issues. So what do you do that sets yourself apart to make you different from every other speaker or different from what we talk about every day, whether it's on a show like this or on the radio or wherever they may be? It's a difficult task, and miraculously, they almost always come up with a way to do it.
Yeah, and they knock it out of the park here. So we're going to go to a quick little commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to keep our eyes on the stage. Again, Charlie Kirk, CEO and founder of Turning Point USA, also a host on Real America's Voice, going to the stage to kick off this big event. You don't want to miss it. You're watching Real America's Voice. We'll be right back.
Quality content that aims to impress and change culture? Tired of how the left weaponizes the media? Looking for badass alternatives to the lies that you're seeing on TV? I thought so. Well, what are you waiting for? Go to Turning Point USA's YouTube channel right now and click subscribe, and bang, get instant notifications on content that you won't see anywhere else. You're welcome.
This new whistleblower is out, and what's he saying? He's saying that foreign intelligence agencies had backdoor access to Twitter for years.
Oh, that's normal for everybody to accept right now. These people have lost their minds.
Yeah, you're right. I'm back. Holy shit. And he goes, yeah, you just killed Osama bin Laden. Your life just changed. Now get to work.
Thoughts on abortion? Check. Thoughts on gender? Check. Whether or not America is the greatest nation on the planet? Check.
There is no safe legal abortion. Only marriage, only natural marriage unites the two people to whom children have a natural right.
Booked an abortion Border Patrol station. And then once they're done and processed at the Border Patrol station, they are then put on a non-government organization-owned bus. You're watching illegals walk out of this NGO and literally just walk out onto the streets.
The layoffs are a-coming. Sorry, Daddy Jeffy doesn't care about you anymore.
Disney should stay out of politics.
Love you. Bye.
Remember our promise, our oath, our solemn vow to you to be good, be brief, be going.
These are the front lines, and I will see every single one of you on the next one.
greatest nation in the world is fleeting. Divisions and fear flood our streets and accelerate us into chaos. What will the future of America look like if we continue at this rate? If we fast forward the clock.
The Chinese Communist Party has invaded America. We just received word that the Chinese Communist Party has seized the city of Chicago. Communism has now taken hold over most major cities across the country.
This is your nightly address, sanctioned by our leader, Xi Jinping. The one-child policy remains in stance. Violators of this policy will result in termination. Advanced surveillance has been installed within private borders and businesses to ensure productivity and protection. Remember, these guidelines are in place for your safety and direct orders from our leader, Xi Jinping. Any detection of rebellion or coups will be met with immediate termination.
America has never hesitated to stare down evil and conquer it, and it never will. The courageous will always stand up to fight back and defend our independence. Throughout history, our heroes have fought for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we have achieved greatness as a nation.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
It hasn't always been easy, but America has always prevailed.
Today our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America.
And we are not stopping now.
It's been a good year for a lot of folks on the job front.
Unemployment in America, 17-year low.
The Parents Uprising goes nationwide.
Now is the time to take a stand.
You stand on the shoulders of people before you that allowed you to have freedom. The nation is not going to save itself.
With our future hanging in the balance, are you prepared for the fight?
Thank you. Give it up for the Turning Point staff that made that video. Is that not incredible? Wow. That is just awesome. Great to see all of you. I just want to compliment our Turning Point staff for the promotion, the marketing, the branding of this world-class event. I mean, this is just extraordinary, isn't it? And one of my favorite takeaways from today is to show that in Maricopa County, you can get people through lines effectively and print badges and, right? Maricopa County, if you want to learn how to get 10,000 people through a line and print something with almost no problems, come to a Turning Point USA event. That's all I gotta say. Too soon is what they're saying, and they say it helps with healing. Honored to be here, everybody, and thank you guys for taking your valuable time to be here and to get recharged, re-energized, and to think deeply in the next couple of days of why we fight and why we sacrifice so much of our money and our energy and our time. You see, we're in a very important time in our nation's history, and we as a movement, as a conservative movement, need a vision. Without a vision, the people perish, is what it says in the scriptures. And I have the opportunity to travel the country and talk to lots of different people, and we have been lacking a coherent vision of what we as conservatives believe in and what we are fighting for. Now, we know what the bad guys are fighting for. And a movement with no vision, we're nothing more than just a gang, just a random group of people with kind of shared ideas and shared values. But a vision, something that we are aiming for, something as a movement that we strive for, that we work for, all of a sudden will make everything make sense again. You see, there's so many people here that are taking the bold and courageous step to homeschool your kids. Where are our homeschool mothers and fathers here that have said in the last couple of years or in the last year, I'm going to go run for school board? There's plenty of people here that have run for school board, people that have run for office. Who here knocked on doors this midterm cycle for candidates? You see, this room is the room that always goes the extra mile. But one of the things we have to take a step back and say, well, what exactly are we fighting for? What does success look like as a vision and as a movement? So the vision of our opponents and the Marxist totalitarian left is filled with venom, hatred, darkness, resentment, arrogance, and despair. We could go at length, and you're going to hear about it from our amazing speakers, about how the totalitarian left has taken over our institutions, how they're teaching our children this vile garbage of critical race theory and this woke nonsense. We know what they want. They want power, they want control, they want uniformity, and they want submission. Now, this is not some sort of abstract concept. One of the reasons why I believe that Turning Point USA is the most important organization in America is because we go to places where there are not a lot of conservatives. At Turning Point USA, we play offense with a sense of urgency to go to places that we are in the ideological and philosophical minority. And guess what? We're not always welcomed when we go to these college campuses, but we are going to win when we go to places that we are not always welcomed and we go there anyway. And our Turning Point USA students and chapters are doing that every single day. And so recently, you probably saw my visit at the University of New Mexico, my mostly peaceful visit to the University of New Mexico, where they did bring out the welcoming committee of the riot squad, and these terrorists were there at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, so bothered that our amazing Turning Point students wanted to have an event about free speech, the Constitution, and conservative ideas. Enjoy this short clip of what we just experienced.
Who are you?
That's what the f*** you is, right? You coward. You can get the f*** off our campus. You don't f***ing belong here, you f***ing pussy.
What do you think about the cops? What do you think about the cops?
Cops? You know what I say? Americans. Especially the cops.
Yeah, really pleasant and joyful people. They're a movement of happiness and uplifting positivity. But we did not allow these terrorists that try to prevent our students to be able to go to the event, that did everything to cancel it, to win. We made a point at Turning Point USA to continue the event, saying we don't care the cost, we don't care what it's going to take. And we also said, hey, if you're going to act like a domestic terrorist on a college campus, then we are going to mock you relentlessly. Enjoy this. And how peaceful they are.
Because we want peace. We're about solidarity and bringing peace here. But we're here to show them that love.
This is why we're going to win. I mean, there is no way these people long-term are going to win. And it's going to require courage and boldness to go to places where even though they deploy their paid activists, we're going to keep on showing up. In fact, I think we have our Turning Point leaders from the University of New Mexico here somewhere. And those are the real heroes that have to go to class every single day, that are spit on, that are called names, and they continue to fight. So what is our vision as conservatives? We know their vision is one of despair and confusion, the destroying of distinctions. One of the things the totalitarian left wants to do for our society is to destroy the distinction between God and man, between man and woman, between good and evil. They want to blur the lines that allow us to live in a free and stable and civil society. Because you know what? They get a lot more powerful that way. But our vision needs to be clear and bold. How about this? We want a country where our kids love America again. We want a country where kids are taught about Jefferson and Madison and Jay. A country where they're taught about Abraham Lincoln and the beauty of the Declaration and the Constitution and the Federalist Papers. We want a country where kids are taught that if you judge somebody on the basis of skin, you are a racist, and we should instead care about character, not the complexion of somebody's skin. Our vision for America, it's hard to believe I even have to say this, is we want a country where kids can be kids again. We want a country where kids are safe from groomer, teachers, and predators who are trying to put prescriptive pharmaceuticals into their bodies that will do irreversible damage. We want kids to be kids again in America. We want to live in a country where puberty is not treated like some sort of illness that needs irreversible medical surgery. We want to live in a country where the innocence of children is preserved and protected. We want to live in a country where we don't have the debate, some sort of, we don't have a debate. There is no debate about pedophilia, period, end of story. We want to live in a country where that's a non-negotiable. Our vision is that we want to value wisdom, eternal principles, prudence, common sense, more than someone who has a PhD in North African lesbian poetry. I believe there is more wisdom in the American plumbing community than at Harvard or Yale. This one hits home. We want to live in a country and build a country and rebuild the country where it's easy to be a parent, where it's easy to get married and have children. If we as conservatives stand for anything, it should be to tell our young people that one of the most beautiful things you can do is to get married and have kids. And right now, that is increasingly difficult in this confusing, chaotic time. Young people say, well, it's just too expensive to get married and have children. It's just too difficult. Or, I don't want to participate in the patriarchy. What a robbery of joy. I could say this now personally. We welcomed the daughter into the world back in August. Praise God. To think that children, young people, are growing up and being told that there's something oppressive or tyrannical about the covenant between a man and a woman and having children. Hey, we as conservatives, if there's anything that we stand for, it is to be fruitful and to multiply. And if you look at what the left is trying to do, less children because humans are a stain on the environment. You look at every one of the things they're trying to teach, like, oh, you don't need kids. You could be happy with, video games and some sort of promotion at your corporate job. Maybe that is for you, but one of the reasons why our generation, it's very sad, is the most depressed, suicidal, alcohol addicted, and drug addicted generation in history is the stuff that gives you meaning they have been told is evil. And if there is anything our movement does, it is to tell the young people in this room and across the country, it's okay to get married and have children. In fact, you should get married and have children. Now, I want to take a step back and brag on the phenomenal, unprecedented, and spectacular work that Turning Point USA is doing. Many of you know some of the work we do on college campuses, as we saw there. In fact, I have one more video to show, which goes to show, again, one of the things, you just have to mock the left, okay? These people make it so easy. Joe Bob, who's one of our best, most talented contributors, he's amazing. He goes to these college campuses and he just gets these people to open up. This is one of my favorite, and it's at University of Texas, Austin. I'll give you 3 guesses how you know his political affiliation as soon as you see a video of him.
They're only there to make money. I mean, that's their long-term profit maker. It's content. So don't give them the content. Just make fun of them, ruin their content. Don't engage with it.
Come here to our campuses. You making a out of us with your fucking clever editing. It's honestly pathetic. You think this is a real job? I mean, dude. Wait, we're out here getting real jobs and you're fucking bothering us day to day.
Yeah, I mean, for real. Like, that's the best thing you can do because you're not going to beat them in a debate. I sure as hell can't. You know? Like, it's their job. Don't talk to them. It's not worth it. Make fun of them. When they show up, make fun of them.
Don't talk to them. Make fun of them. They're only here to create content.
Can't win in debate. The work we do on college and high school campuses is moving the dial, but I don't think everyone understands the depth or the sophistication of what we've been able to accomplish at Turning Point USA. First, from a big picture perspective, from a worldview perspective. In the last 5 years, according to Morning Consult, in 2017, when Turning Point was just getting started, when our annual event was like the size of that seating section over there, 47% of our nation's young people self-identified with a liberal worldview. 47%. 5 years later, today, 34% of our nation's young people, a 13-point collapse. 13 points. Now, full disclosure, more young people still identify as liberal as conservative. Conservative increased by 1 point. But look what we're up against. The education system, digital social media. But what we are seeing is movement in the right direction. And it's not happening by itself. At Turning Point USA, we are on pace to hit 1,000 high school chapters across the country. High school chapters all across the country. And if you are a high school student out there and you are not yet involved, you have got to go to our booth in the exhibit hall and start a high school chapter. We just launched 1.5 years ago, TPUSA Faith, which is an incredible, I see some of our pastors here all across the country. We hosted an amazing pastor summit, over 400 pastors and wives at our pastor summit. And if you ask me, one of the most important things that needs to happen in American Christianity is we need to excommunicate the demonic, anti-biblical idea of wokeism out of the American church immediately. The chapters that we're starting on college and high school campuses, it's not just a matter of having a group on campus, but we are creating students that are having to persevere and endure criticism, backlash, slander, smear, opposition. One of the reasons why I believe we are going to win is because our young people are tougher than the liberals. Our opposition is fragile. Our opposition can't hear a speaker without trying to deploy the shock troops. Our opposition has not had to contend or fight for their beliefs. You go talk to some of our amazing students at Turning Point USA here, what they have to go through. And yes, we could say, oh yeah, feel sorry for us, the persecution, the graded differently, getting kicked out of class, all of that. But guess what? You are seeing a conservative movement that is growing stronger the more they fight. What gives me hope is that what we see on these campuses is a generation that understands the only way you beat the left is you never give up and you never give them an inch, period. It doesn't matter what they call you. It doesn't matter the names. It doesn't matter the smear. It doesn't matter the slander at all. The media department at Turning Point USA reaching hundreds of millions of people with daily shows with Jack Posobiec, Drew Hernandez, Alex Clark, millions of people on Instagram and Facebook every single day, impacting culture, making persuasive content. Not to mention the newly launched Turning Point Academy, which we're actually having the Educator Summit right now. And if any of you want to homeschool your kids, or if you want to get your kids at a government school, you should do that yesterday and talk to us at Turning Point Academy how we could supply curriculum, training, and have you execute a rescue mission for your kid or grandkid out of the government schools and into Turning Point Academy and say, well, Charlie, what do you stand for at Turning Point Academy? Super simple. We believe there is a God and you are not him. We believe in the natural law. No CRT, no wokeism, no queer theory, no LGBTQ nonsense, no postmodernism, no post-structuralism, pro-American, pro-freedom, pro-liberty ideas and curriculum for the next generation, unapologetically educating the next generation around truth. Now, I gotta really brag on our team here, because what you are seeing, from the beauty of the stage here to the entire experience, is being pulled off mainly by people in their late 20s. This is an amazing thing. I gotta be very honest with you. There's a lot to be critical of the younger generation. I get it. But it's getting a little tired when I have to hear that, young people are just miserably liberal and lazy and hopeless. Some are. But I want you to look around these next couple of days. Introduce yourself to a Turning Point student. Go up to one of our booths. You will see some of the wisest, most courageous, most well-educated, the most committed citizens that you could come of any age whatsoever. You say, Charlie, I'm looking for hope. I'm looking for optimism. Look around you. Look at what's been pulled off from the thousands of high school chapters, thousand high school chapters, the hundreds of college chapters that we have, from the media enterprise that we have, the Turning Point Academy, all these different things. It is mostly and mainly led by a younger generation that knows that we do not have the luxury to give up. That this is being led against the totalitarian Marxist left. And so this is really the question in front of us the next couple of days. It is the challenge of our generation. The challenge of our generation in front of us is, which direction do we want to go? The direction of a free society, a direction where we are never going to mandate a vaccine again and someone will lose their job. Are we going to do that? Are we going to go in the direction that reasserts the principles of the independent judiciary and consent to the governed and separation of powers and the greatest political document ever written in the U.S. Constitution? Or are we going to go in this other direction? Here's what I do know, is that there's a fair amount of people that are disappointed and upset because of things that have happened in the last couple months. And that's understandable. But the test of this generation, the test of all of us, the test of our country that is unfolding in front of us, I truly believe is, are we going to give up against an opposition that is so entrenched, doing so much damage? And I'm going to read an email I received. And we get lots of emails on the Charlie Kirk Show. Thank you, by the way, all of you that watch our program. It really blesses us, truly. Thank you. It's a great blessing. I'll read an email. Charlie, and you might have saw this episode. Charlie, I intentionally no longer vote. I have disengaged from the system. It's time to watch America burn. It's been nice while it lasted. Now, you might say, Charlie, that's a troll. No, he's actually a donor to Turning Point USA, which is super weird, right? It's like, why would you donate? People are sometimes walking contradictions. I understand that there is a temptation to give up. Charlie, it's overwhelming. They seem to be able to do everything they want to do whenever they want to do it. But look at what we accomplished in just this last year. Not politically. No. A year ago, we were up on stage here talking about how the fight on social media was largely helpless. A year ago, we talked about how we were never going to get our speech back and maybe we'll have to start an alternative or whatever it is. And 1 year later, yes, because of the courage of the world's richest man, but also because we created the environment where it was popular and necessary, Twitter has been purchased and liberated from the Marxist Silicon Valley left. And let me just reemphasize, God bless Elon Musk for what he has done by purchasing Twitter. I was debating whether or not to come out with a do not amplify shirt. It was a debate. That's the only way they can win. We are going to win in the end, because the only way they've been able to have even a slight advantage against us is by suppressing us without our consent, censoring us, outright cheating. You see, part of the moment that we are in is all of a sudden recognizing and realizing that the other side is playing for keeps. I don't even think we've started to fight, to be perfectly honest. I don't think we've even begun to get into the arena to start to fight. Homeschooling has nearly doubled in the last 2 years in America. Nearly doubled. You look around here, this, by the way, congratulations, you are now part of the largest multi-day event in the history of the conservative movement. Look around, well over 10,800 people, tickets purchased. That's a sign that things are moving, that there's momentum. And I'm gonna close with this, which is, this room is the greatest room of untapped potential the Republic has ever seen. Yes, you are doing a lot. You're giving money, you're sending your prayers, you're praying and fasting, you're educating your kids. I totally understand all of that. This room can change America by deciding to change America. The untapped potential in this room will lead to somebody who's inspired by this speech, similar, by the way, to kind of turning point alumni, we could call her. She started with us, Anna Paulina, who was with us for 3 years and will now be a member of Congress coming into January. Similar to Austin Smith, Turning Point alumni, who will now be the youngest member of the Arizona legislature coming into Arizona this January. I could go story after story after story. But my charge to you these next couple days is to be willing to be challenged. Do not have the attitude where you say, Charlie, I'm doing a lot. I'm doing too much. Maybe you are. But we can all do more. In fact, it requires us to do more. 10,800 people that decide to up their game in the next calendar year terrifies the left. 10,800 people that will then be dispersed across America. We have all 50 states represented, by the way. All 50 states that then go back and say, I'm going to focus on school boards. I'm going to focus on getting rid of the groomers in our public education system. Maybe I run a business and I'm going to double the size of my business so that I can compete against Goldman Sachs or I can compete against Coca-Cola. Whatever it is, whatever you're called to do more of it. And that is the challenge in front of us. You see, the temptation that I believe the enemy is putting towards us is to say, my actions do not matter and we will not see victory. If you find yourself getting into that thinking, you have to stop yourself and say, wait a second, we live in the most amazing nation ever to exist. And I'm so tired of people saying, well, Charlie, nations come and nations fall. But there's never been a country like America. It's the freest nation ever to exist in the history of the world. There's never been a constitution like our Constitution. And guess what? You look around in this room, don't give me this nonsense that Americans are giving up. That is not true. In fact, after the developments of the last couple of months, I'm actually more convicted than ever to fight. I am more charged up to make sure that we fight the evil entrenched in our land, to support the good guys, to put in more hours, to grow to more chapters, to get more pastors and more churches to speak out boldly. No. The bad guys would love nothing more than for us the next couple days to have a pity party of misery and say, feel sorry for us and maybe, it'll work out in the future. No. We are the masters of our own destiny. We are the recipients of a nation that we did not build, but we inherited it. We are going to celebrate that nation. And in the next 4 days, we are going to commit to a plan of action to take back our country and to create something bold and beautiful for the next generation. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
for some of the speeches. You know, Fox does not allow us to take Laura Ingraham.
Yeah.
So we'll be covering our own stuff, and we can take Tucker. Yes. You see, when you have the #1 rated show on the network on Fox News, and you're the de facto second in command of the Republican Party, I look at Tucker Carlson as probably the #2 guy in the Republican Party next to President Trump. You can tell anybody you want how you want things to run down and go down, and I'm sure he said, let people, whoever they want, take my speech.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Probably right.
Yeah, that's the power of Tucker Carlson.
Yep, it is. So coming up after the break, he's not coming up quite yet, but our very own Ben Bergquam is.
Yes. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll talk to Ben.
Sounds good.
When I do research, that's one of about 3 different websites that I go to daily in the morning is the Gateway Pundit.
Me too.
And so, Ben, why don't you tell us who you got over there and take it away, brother.
I got my buddy here. So, actually, I think I met you. I don't know if it's a Turning Point event or a CPAC event. Where did we meet, Jordan?
You know, I don't know. I think it might have been a campaign rally. A few years back, we might have bumped into each other, but it might have been another Turning Point event. You know, I can't remember. I feel like we've run into each other a good amount of times.
It's funny because Jordan was one of those guys that I would always have. He'd be like, hey, it was always, you were always interested in being on, and like being on, being, whether coming on with us or doing something else. And I would just always run into it. And then all of a sudden it's like, Jordan's with the Gateway Pundit. This guy's like serious out there now. He's like a professional.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me that compliment. Yeah, I've been with the Gateway Pundit for about 2 years now. I started out covering the Arizona election audit after the stolen 2020 election. So from there, I've kind of, I guess, been doing good journalism according to a good amount of people. So
well, you definitely have hair for TV. I mean, like, I wish I had those flowing locks there. But the best part about what you do,
me too,
and what Jim Hoft and the whole Gateway Pundit, I love the camaraderie. So what we have going on right now in America is a resurgence of real journalism, and I call myself an opinion journalist. I don't pretend to be a opinionated, straight line journalist. But there's some really great journalists that we have on our network. There's some really great journalists that you have at Gateway Pundit. But really, there's this whole new community of people that are, where CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and all of these fake news propaganda media out there that pretended to be real media were on this side. Now all of a sudden there's this new generation of media that's coming out, and ironically it's the very media that they wouldn't let in to the hearing. So we're in there, we're at Maricopa County, we're trying to just ask the questions. We're trying to ask Bill Gates, and we're trying to ask Stephen Richer simple things like, hey, you ran a PAC against Kari Lake, how does that work?
Right, yeah. So we've got this new up and coming, well, not up and coming, I mean, all of us, we have millions and millions of viewers. We're actually outnumbering these fake news outlets nowadays, but yeah, they don't want to let us in despite our massive viewership, me and you, because we're going to ask some serious questions about the conflicts of interest involved in this recent election, the machine failures where over 59% of machines were failing on election day, and they were giving incorrect advice to voters on election day. And there's just all these other questions that are arising, especially with Kari Lake's lawsuit. We're finding out that 300,000 ballots from that went to Runbeck, they didn't have chain of custody. We're finding out that these machine failures, they had to be intentional. There's no way that you can test these machines and then have a coincidental failure on election day when Republicans are turning out 3-1 for Republican candidates. So I really see it as we're taking back our country with media that tells the truth, where they stole our country with media that lies, with lying media. That's how they stole the 2020 election. That's how they influenced the election. That's how they got away with it, by labeling us all conspiracy theorists. But I think with this new wave of conservative journalists, we're really taking back the narrative and taking back the truth.
Yeah, no, that's really what it's all about. It's about coming together. And again, they didn't want us in that room because they knew the questions we were going to ask. Thankfully, I had an opportunity to confront Bill Gates and Stephen Richer and some of these scumbags on the board in person. But this is what it's about. It's real media coming out there and standing up, telling the truth. Again, with some great journalists. We have some amazing, like the team that God is bringing together on this network is just incredible. It's incredible. But it's also awesome to be able to work with you, Jordan. And for people that aren't familiar with the Gateway Pundit, how can they find your stories, you personally? How can they, by the way, I shouldn't even ask this because you've got like 14 different handles. You got to get you one. Okay, but how do they find you?
Yeah, so thegatewaypundit.com, every day we got 2.5 million readers each day. We put up tens of articles, up to 10 to 50 articles, something like that. But my social media name, now get this, my Twitter, it's Conradson Jordan. My truth, it's Jordan Covfefe, like the famous Trump tweet. And then my Getter, it's Jordan Conradson. Same with my Instagram, Jordan Conradson.
And then there's one that's Conradson Jordan, I think.
That's my Twitter.
Okay. But anyways, just look up Jordan Conradson, Gateway Pundit. He's going to keep rocking it. It's awesome. And then we're going to be out here, Kari Lake, the 21st and 22nd. The lawsuit's going down. Right. You're not an odds guy, but I'm just going to ask you, what do you think is going to happen? Is the judge going to stand up for her?
You know, I'm hoping he stands up for her. He seemed fair in the last hearing.
And I should just say, is he going to stand up for the truth?
I think there's a good chance he'll stand up for the truth. Either way, it's going to go up to the appeals court. From there, each side I'm expecting to appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. So ultimately, I think it's going to be the Supreme Court deciding this.
Pray for courageous judges, because what we've seen is obvious. But anyways, Kari Lake will be joining us tomorrow as well. So,
you know.
boys and girls, they grow up to become men and women. This is not the product of our choice. It's not what we want. It's what happens organically because it is nature. Putting low IQ ideologues like Sandy Cortez in charge of the power grid really does, in the end, mean the end of civilization. It's not hard to have a decent country. It's not complicated. You just need leaders who want one. Freedom of speech is under attack. Your loyalty to your family, to your faith, just because they require you to violate all of that doesn't mean you have to.
We have smoke machines just like that at my house. I pad into the kitchen this morning in my boxers and they go off. Seems appropriate. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So funny. Thank you. I honestly, I say this every year. I come to this every year and I always open by saying, I never go anywhere. Which is literally true. So this is like my one venture out of my house of the year, and I just love it. I live far and away in isolation with my wife and 4 dogs, and I love my life. But I come to a place like this and I run into every person I've ever known and liked throughout my entire... I ran into Harmeet Dillon backstage, who I absolutely love, who is one of the very few lawyers in the country who still believes in the Bill of Rights and is trying to go to Washington and make it better, a person of integrity, and about 20 other people I know. So it is a huge blessing for me to be here. Thank you very much for having me. I've spent the last 3 hours backstage chatting like a 7th grade girl, just like a magpie, and another thing, and another thing. So I hope I'm not all talked out. Well, you're nice. Thank you. But I was thinking the last month, as I was flying out here this morning, I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? And it's not usually a problem for me since I can't stop talking. I can't decelerate. But the last month really has been one of the most interesting, I don't know if we have enough critical distance to call it transformative, but it's really changed the way I think about a lot of things, which when you're 53 is a rare occurrence. As you get older, your beliefs tend to ossify, and you're like, I first thought of that in 1985, and it's still true. So it's kind of nice to have something pierce those assumptions and learn something new. And the midterm elections taught me a number of new things. And I should preface my story of what I've learned by telling you that you never learn anything except through pain and humiliation. I wish that weren't true. Unfortunately, no one has put me in charge of the rules of nature, so that is the law, and it's unchanging. But you never learn anything from succeeding. I have never learned anything from succeeding, from getting what I want. I've only learned from failure, and particularly from humiliation. That is, I'm sorry, I wish that weren't true. Yeah, well, exactly. And I thought of that on the plane today. I'm like, I'm literally flying to Maricopa County, Arizona. Unbelievable. It couldn't be more perfect. But it is true, and it's always something to remember the next time you're humiliated, and not in a minor way, by the way. I think if you live long enough, there's a moment in your life, kind of inevitably, where you're not just humiliated in the sense of like, oh, I'm embarrassed, it was black tie, but I only brought a business suit. Those are minor league humiliations, but like truly humiliated. Like where your neighbors avert their gaze when you pull into the driveway at night, like, I don't know this guy. And that literally just happened to me. Now, the midterm elections were like a grave disappointment, I think, to every normal person. But they were particularly painful to me because I got them so completely wrong. Like I've never gotten anything wronger in my life. And it's not like I, blew a question on the physics test. I blew like a question on the test that I've been preparing for 31 years since I've been covering politics. And the question is really simple: who's going to win? And I looked at this I tried to take the overview, and I don't really cover politics, but I cover politics adjacent topics, right? What's happening in the country? What are people thinking? What should we think? What are the problems? How do we fix them? And I looked at this and I thought, this is super simple. You have a political party in charge that is not only not delivering, and by delivering I mean making people's lives better in measurable ways, but is failing in very measurable ways. Like, people are getting poorer, the country's getting more chaotic. Like, it's not, I could belabor this for an hour. In fact, I do, Monday through Friday, if you care to tune in. But you almost don't need to, because it's so obvious that it doesn't kind of need explanation. I mean, the story tells itself. It's the story of your life, because you live here. So it's not going well. And in a normal system, the party in charge of deciding what we do next would be punished for that, because that's what politics is. Politics is a contest between, in our country, two parties, each of which promises to make your life better, and the one that achieves that or convinces you that they're achieving that gets rewarded by getting reelected, right? Right. With me now. Can I get an amen? So that's obvious. Like, that's our system. That's Civics 101. So you look at this and you're like, they're not even promising to make your life better. Like, they're not even pretending. Oh, castrate your children. Okay. How's some inflation? How about a war that we have nothing to do with? Yeah, we want more of that? Yeah, a lot more. So, like, there's no way a party that pretends that, that is going to make your life better, it's like not even up for debate. So it's like they're going to be destroyed because they're not even trying. And by the way, of all the things the Biden administration has done, the only one that I really understood, this is how old-fashioned I am, was the student loan forgiveness, which I completely opposed because I thought it was unfair, and it set up all kinds of terrible incentives, and the whole thing's a scam, and they're perpetuating it, and they're taking payoffs from the education lobby, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at least it kind of made sense. We will pay you to vote for us. Okay, I get that. That's not complicated. That's just corrupt. I spent 35 years in Washington, D.C. I understand that. Oh, you don't like me? Here's some money. Okay. But everything else, it was like, how about this? I'm going to make it almost unbearable to live here. That's what I'm offering you. More suffering, degradation, poverty. And then they win. And my mind was blown. And by the way, I got so wrapped up in it emotionally, which I try not to do because I don't believe in any politician. I know them too well. I just don't. I mean, I think some are way better than others. Some are just flat out awful. And some are, nice people. I know I'm friends with like two of them after a lifetime of covering them. No, they're weird. I mean, seriously. You live to have people you've never met before scream your name? What kind of sicko are you? If you crave the adulation of strangers, you're emotionally damaged, beyond repair. So whatever. I don't fall for politicians. Like, I get who they are. Very few have happy personal lives, children who respect them, spouses who love them. It's just... So I've never done this before, but this election, I was like, the other side is so bad that I just got sucked into it emotionally. And I was like, hey, New York, meet your new governor, Lee Zeldin. In New York, no, I agree. I mean, I was all in for Lee Zeldin, but that's kind of the point. It's New York. It's a state that's controlled by a political machine that has no intention of letting Lee Zeldin win. It's like, that's not going to happen, but I convinced myself that it was, and then it didn't. And then I had to ask the question, because there was kind of no getting around it, I staked whatever minor credibility I have on these predictions, which almost all turned out to be false. So I did the thing that I think all adults should do when confronted with their own failure. I went pheasant hunting for 3 days. No, I did. I literally did. I went to South Dakota and stood in the cold, walked through cornfields. I did. And there was a ton going on, and I did it anyway. And I never take time off because I like my job, but I did. And I did it because I needed some silence in which to marinate in my shame. Because I knew out of that would come enlightenment, or at least the beginning of it. And here's what I concluded. A couple of things. This was a fantastic reminder that we can't really predict events very well as people, actually. There is a limit to our insight about the future, to our predictive powers. That's not a limitation of talk show hosts or of people who come to Turning Point. That is a human limitation that every person is bound by because, repeat after me, we are not God. So we actually don't know what the future holds, actually. And not to be morbid, but we could all get hit by a bus on the way out of this building. And pray God we won't be, but we could be. And that's a truth that we live with every day, and if we're wise, we never forget it. We don't know what's coming. We control the moment we're living in now, and that's it, and barely even that. We have less power than we think. We can't even cure male pattern baldness, okay? No, it's true. It's true. Or add a single hair to the top of our heads, in other words. So to tell ourselves, like, we've got it all figured out and we know what's going to happen, we are lying to ourselves, and when we say it out loud, we're lying to others and misleading them. So we should start with the knowledge of our own limitations. We are limited, and that is the beginning of wisdom, right there. That's the beginning of wisdom. And the opposite of that, by the way, is the beginning of hubris, which is the cause of virtually all the suffering now currently on display. People who don't understand their own limitations, who don't understand how unwise they are, who have no sense of their own ridiculousness, who really believe they've got it all figured out, and only if we can get a bigger supercomputer and more AI, we'll have the future mapped. People who make that claim, and worse, who believe it, have made the fatal error in life, which is mistaking themselves for God. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the division in life. There's clearly, and you can smell it, and I should say at the outset that I was raised an Episcopalian, so my spiritual discernment is blunted at best. So don't take any theological lecture from me, please. I stayed with that church till 2 years ago. That's how out of it I am. And it's like fully a pagan enterprise now. Like literally, I think they're burning calves they've slaughtered or something at the altar. But I can feel that a lot of people just in my orbit, and I see it in conversation. I'm not sure there's like some great revival going on, but there is a growing sense that we can't see everything that's happening. There are other forces at work here. That's not a sectarian point. I'm not making a case for Christianity, though I could and would be happy to, but I probably don't need to here. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm not making a point about a specific religion. I'm making a point about the existence of something more powerful than us. And that shouldn't be a point that anyone would have to make because it's just so obvious. You're born knowing that. Every person has inborn, literally at birth, a sense of justice, of right and wrong, a sense that betraying other people, lying to them, stealing from them, hurting them is wrong. The fine points we are taught, but the basic facts we know, they arrive like a dog's ability to swim. Like we're born with it. Now, why are we born with that? And it's always the same. You can read Hammurabi's Code, you know, one of the first documents we have in all of history, and you would recognize the moral code right away. You might not agree with all of it. Now, the beheadings seem a little much. But the crimes are still crimes. Because it never changes, because we didn't write the rules. Duh. So what does that tell you? It tells you there's something bigger than us. And that's never something that most people at most periods in history, in fact, at any period in history, have ever needed to learn. Because they knew it. It was assumed. There's never been, in other words, just to put a fine point on it, there has never been a society at scale in all history that we know of until now that was secular. Where it wasn't just an obvious observation that there was a God or that there was some force larger than us, that we weren't the last word. We've had plenty of kings and emperors, but all of them ruled. Every single one of them ruled. From the Roman Empire to that fake duchess from Santa Monica who's married to the airhead kid who's going to be king. From then until now, every monarch has ruled on the basis of the claim that he was chosen by a power bigger than himself. I'm ordained by God. So, like, God is central to our understanding of justice and to our understanding of government, and has been since people emerged from the caves and probably before. So my only point is we live in a society, the only society ever, and by we I mean the West, where that's not taken for granted. Why is that significant? Well, here's why. Because in place of that has been the option, which is leaders who believe they are God. And the problem with believing you're God is you're not. You're not. And you can't be. That's just not true. So it's not just an offense against theology, it's an offense against reality. Like, that's not true. You can't extend your own life, much less walk on water, much less fix a complicated diplomatic situation. Like, you have no power. And the minute you pretend otherwise, you lead us into disaster. And that is true at the national level. Having people who don't believe in God, in other words, who don't acknowledge an authority above themselves, isn't just like bad, it's a recipe for total destruction. Period. And just to be clear, I'm not making that point as a Christian, which I am. So I'm not saying you need, I'm making a much broader, more ecumenical, more human point. Leaders who don't believe in God think they are God. Repeat after me. Leaders who don't believe in God think they are God. And the last person you ever want in charge is someone who is demonstrably insane. And anyone who thinks he's God is, by definition, insane. And so they are. And that fact, I would say, explains the majority of what we're seeing now, the things that confuse me as a middle-aged man who's looking out on a country I don't recognize, and more specifically, a politics I don't understand. So why would you be encouraging children to mutilate their bodies? No, I mean, yeah, it's offensive. I mean, obviously, as a parent, I'm a room full of parents and young people. Like, it's very offensive on that level. But think about it philosophically. Like, why would that be so important to you? Why? Why would that be so important? Why would advocating for abortion, not tolerating abortion, I am pro-life and I mean it, actually, but it's just true. But I also, since I grew up in a tolerant country that acknowledged that decent people disagreed, I'll just say out loud, I know people who consider themselves pro-choice who are thoroughly decent people. I think they're completely wrong, but I don't think they're evil. And that's kind of where we lived until 2 years ago, when all of a sudden you started seeing people advocating for abortion. Like, no, it's a good thing. What? That's not the conversation I grew up with. The conversation I grew up with was, there are situations where people are forced to do this bad thing. It's only been in the last couple of years you've had people stand up and say, no, it's the key to salvation, abortion. Why would you say something like that? What does that mean? It's at that point that you realize we're not really having a political conversation. This is not a conversation about our rights, our bodily autonomy. And by the way, I'm sorry, the bodily autonomy argument, the my body, my choice, you kind of blew that with the vax mandates, son. So back off a little bit. Obviously. By the way, as one of the only people in my business who actually thought it was my body and my choice and was screamed at for it, buzz off. But anyway, sorry, leaving that aside, leaving my eccentric medical choices out of it, I would just say it's not really about that. And those of us who were dumb enough to think it was, those of us who were still like referring to slogans written 50 years ago to explain what was happening today, missed the whole story. No, it's not about that at all. Anyone who's advocating for abortion as a positive good is doing something very different. It's not advocating for women or choice or freedom. This person's advocating for killing other people. Like, what is that? What is that? Not tolerating killing of other people. Not like, wars are bad, but sometimes you have to in self-defense. I get it. I may disagree with you. On abortion, I may disagree with you, but this is a different thing. No, you should do this. Our Treasury Secretary said, literally, Janet Yellen said. Janet Yellen, who, I can't get over this. Since I'm aging, I get stuck on certain things and keep repeating them. Janet Yellen ran the Fed. So, why is the U.S. dollar worth so much less than it was 15 years ago? Janet Yellen? Anyone? Janet Yellen, anyone? It's like you did that, and then you became Treasury Secretary? I mean, at that point, it's like, meet your new Treasury Secretary, Sam Bankman-Fried. I mean, as long as we're rewarding fraud with high government positions. Anyway. But she comes out on television. I don't know how she became Treasury Secretary in charge of wrecking the economy, and all of a sudden she's like on TV saying, yeah, well, some people are feeling this inflation thing, which we don't acknowledge is real, but for those of you who claim it is, get an abortion. What? What is that? It's demonic. That's exactly what it is. It is. That's next level. That is purely an effort to hurt people, not help them. If you cared, and I do care. I mean, my dad was adopted, and his mom was like 15. And I get it, a pregnant girl. I mean, as the father of daughters, you feel for that person who feels trapped, no choice, no future. It's a disaster. And I don't think it justifies abortion, but I certainly understand why people feel like they have no choice. I get it. But if you really cared about the woman, you would say, what can we do to help you? How can we help you? Obviously. If that happened to someone you love, I don't care if you're pro-choice or pro-life. It doesn't matter. If you really love that person, you say, how can I help you? I love you. I want to help you. You wouldn't say, just go get an abortion. Stop whining. So what does that tell you? Well, they don't love you. They're trying to hurt you. That's real. So why are they trying to hurt you? There's no rational explanation for it. They're not trying to hurt you so they can win more votes. They're trying to hurt you because they've been seized by a spirit to hurt other people. There's no other explanation. We're looking at the election results from last month, and we interviewed Carrie Lake, who I really like, the other night. And yeah, I think Carrie Lake is an enormously talented person. I mean, amazingly talented. And she also worked in the media for 30 years, so she knows the depth of the corruption because she was there, which I really appreciate, having seen it myself. So interviewing Carrie Lake, and she's telling us about all the problems with the voting machines. And the majority of voting machines in your county didn't work on election day. It was like 70% of the population lives in one county, and the machines don't work. What? So, I don't know what that was, but I'd love to hear a benign explanation for it. And so I think that played a role. I mean, how could it not? But then you read the results of the statewide referendum in Montana, which is a very reasonable state with Missoula and Bozeman in it. But it's like a state filled with really nice people, huge cattle ranches. I fish there a lot, so I know it pretty well. It's a great state, second biggest state in the continental United States. And there was a referendum on the ballot this November that said, super simple, if a baby is born alive, can't kill the baby. You have to save the baby's life because that's what doctors do. They save lives. It failed. What? In a state that's not, Portland, Oregon, not everyone from Santa Monica has moved to Montana yet. And that failed. That's not a tough call. That's not an esoteric, you know what I mean? How is that what? That failed? Voters refused to say if a child is born alive, that you have to save the child's life. What is that? I mean, I'm very concerned about voting machines. I'm totally opposed to all electronic voting machines, period. I think it's insane. We should be like France and have paper ballots. What is this? And why have we been roped into this thing where you're embarrassed to say it's not even about the specific makers of the machines, just electronic voting machines are a huge risk, and why would you have them if you cared about your democracy? You wouldn't. So, and I do think there is quite a bit of fraud, actually, and I've seen a lot of it and can prove it, so I'm not spitballing here. On the other hand, if they're refusing to endorse a ballot initiative in a pretty reasonable state that says simply you got to save the life of a child, maybe there's something else going on here. I'm serious. There's something else going. That's too dark. That's too dark. There's no other explanation for that. And I don't know what the explanation is, and I plead Episcopalianism here. I'm not going to lecture you or add to your theological knowledge. I'm just going to note the obvious as someone who observes things, who stands back and watches. What the hell is that? There is no rational explanation for that and a whole bunch of other dark things that are happening from which no one is really profiting and people are only suffering. So I'm reverting to first principles in this, and I'll stop with this really quick, but how do you know if something is good or bad in a world where the rules have been suspended, which they effectively have been? If you can't say that's bad, then we can't really say anything's bad. And what's bad is just what the people currently in charge tell us is bad, but that doesn't mean anything. I like chocolate, you like vanilla. I mean, that's not a moral code. That's a fad. But as people who want to sort of try occasionally, at least on Sundays, to be decent, we should have a way of knowing whether something is good or bad. Now, traditionally, I think for most Christians, it's like, well, just ask your pastor. But then, at least as someone who grew up in a church that became pagan, I can tell you that doesn't always work. So, yeah, I think that's a totally fair answer. But for people who aren't going to dive into the Bible, I think there's a beginning, a simpler way to get a sense, and you can put a finer point on it later. But here's how I assess whether an idea is good or bad. By its fruits. And what are those? Well, first of all, any idea that causes a lot of people to suffer for no reason is demonstrably bad. That's obvious. But I will also say that bad ideas produce chaos. They produce disorder. They produce noise. They produce ugliness, physical ugliness, aesthetic ugliness. Bad ideas produce ugly things. That's why our great basilicas are beautiful, right? That's why the dollar store is ugly. Because one grew out of the idea that we need to help the average person transcend his life and think about the next life, about the eternal, about God, and the other grew out of the idea, let's sell more cheap plastic crap from China to poor people, okay? So one grew out of, I think, the most noble idea, and the other a less noble idea, and the results are obvious in the way they look. Don't ignore the obvious. If something is beautiful, what does that mean? By the way, beauty transcends culture. You go to a place you've never been where you don't speak go to Kyoto, Japan next week. Probably don't speak Japanese, probably don't know a lot about the Shinto religion. Go to a Shinto temple. The first thing you'll notice, it's beautiful. Now, how did people 500 years ago in Japan come up with the building that you, as a modern American who doesn't speak Japanese or practice the Shinto religion, think is beautiful? Because all beauty is the same. And what is beauty? Beauty is truth. That's the first thing. True things are beautiful, and beautiful things are true. It's true. It's not opposed. It's real. It's real. And the most beautiful things are real. Your children, your dogs, nature, those are real things. They're beautiful. And the second thing you'll notice about it is that it's calming. Beautiful things are calming. They don't incite you. They calm you. They make you feel peaceful inside. And how do they do that? Through symmetry. Through symmetry, physical symmetry. This side is equal to this side. Just like in nature. Virtually everything in nature is symmetrical. Have you ever noticed that? In case you're wondering if there was a grand design here, I know this all evolved randomly, but somehow it evolved randomly in a beautiful way, in a recognizably beautiful way, in a symmetrical way. Now, why is symmetry important? Because it's a product of order. Order. Bring order out of chaos. That's how this all began, we learned in chapter 1, and that is still, to this day, our duty. Bring order out of the chaos in your home, in the buildings that you build, in the politics that you participate in. Order, not chaos. Chaos is a sign of evil, period. And you don't know how hard it is for me to use the word evil as someone who never grew up using the word evil, but I don't have another word for it. That's exactly what it is. So you will know that an idea is a good idea when the people who follow that idea have lives that are calmer, more orderly, more purposeful, cleaner. By the way, filth, remember the phrase, cleanliness is next to godliness? You'd be like, oh, that's a Victorian phrase. They were so stupid. They had cities without, people smoking meth outside the Civic Center. Idiots. Cleanliness is next to godliness, actually. Yes, you're a mother, I can tell, right? All the moms are like, that's exactly right. It's true, though. It's true. It is totally true. So anybody who is pushing a program that creates confusion, chaos, disorder, anyone who is pushing cultural products, which is art, film, literature, quotation marks around all of them because none of them currently are art. But anyone who is pushing art on you that is disordered, chaotic, asymmetrical, architecture. Frank Gehry, anyone? What is that? It's disgusting, is what it is. It's oppressive to the human spirit. It doesn't elevate us, it crushes us. That's what it does. It's exactly what it does. So that's how I judge it. And if you see enough of it, you know there's no rational explanation for this. Something else is going on. So why am I still in a good mood? And I'll stop with this and take your hostile questions for a minute after. I'm still in a good mood for two reasons. One, I think it's my moral duty. I think we have an obligation to be cheerful. I don't think it's a small thing. Yeah, I mean that. I do. I think it's an obligation. I don't think it's something we feel when we have the second cup of coffee, though I always have the second cup of coffee and then the third and the fourth. Yeah, I'm pro-coffee. Yeah, I'll say it. I'm pro-coffee. There's nothing wrong with that. No prohibitions against that. But I think it's your obligation. Like, you're not here that long. And moping and feeling, sometimes terrible things happen. A loved one dies, you get fired, in my case, several times. And you have an absolute right to wallow in it for a bit, but just for a bit. It is immoral to lie in your own emotional filth and roll around. It is immoral. You have no right to do that. That's an offense against the creation, in my opinion. Get up and be cheerful. And as one of my children once said to me, what if I don't feel cheerful? And I said, well, pretend. Duh. Well, that's fake. Yeah, good. And the longer you fake it, the more it becomes real. Put on the mask and your face will conform to it. Pretend to be something and you will become it. Pretend to be cheerful. How are you this morning? I'm great. How are you? Great. We both just got a bad diagnosis. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to impose that on you. I'm great. But the second, I'm getting crazier as I'm getting older. I think it happens to everybody. Anyway, sorry, excuse me. But the second reason, okay. So the second reason, which is a little bit, actually, I'm not joking at all about the cheerfulness thing at all. In fact, I said to one of my children, when picking a spouse, put cheerfulness above almost all else. I'm actually married a cheerful person, and it's been an enduring blessing. I mean it. Because, life throws you stuff, and, it's just I've had a really blessed life, but no one's life is perfect, and things happen you don't expect. You run out of money, or someone you love dies, or your neighbors hate you. And, as you go through those things, which will happen to every young person in this room, being married to someone who is legit cheerful, says a cheerful spirit, there are probably things that are more important, but that's right at the top of the list. It really, amen. If anyone who's married to a cheerful woman knows what I'm talking about. What a blessing. And I should also note, just to be honest, that the opposite is hell. Anyway, but here's the, not that I've experienced it, but I've seen it, but here's the point. Here's the deeper reason that I actually feel really hopeful, and I have no empirical evidence for this at all. But I told you I went pheasant shooting in South Dakota for 3 days, and I was feeling a little bit down and just I can't believe I did that. I'm 53 and I'm still making obvious mistakes, like telling people that things that are probably not going to come true will come true, and I should not ever be doing that. So, but then I had this surge of hope and of optimism, and it stemmed from this knowledge that has been earned over time, I would say, which is it is 100% true that your lowest points in retrospect were the best moments in your life. That is true. And no one ever wants to believe it. And I think that is both a spiritual principle. I believe there's an entire book about it. That everything is actually the opposite of what you think it is. That the last really will be first. That's not just a rhetorical device. That some guy sitting by the side of a lake in first century Israel said. That is a reality, always and everywhere. If you look back and you're honest on your life and the really sad things that happened, and they are real for everybody, if you're honest, you will see that it's only out of those that happiness grew, that was the foundation for something better, that all wisdom is accrued during those moments. All wisdom. That is definitely true. All wisdom. When you're at your lowest. And that's not like some fake motivational speaker like, no, actually, it's always darkest before the dawn. But it is. That's the thing. It is. And the opposite is also true. The opposite is also true. Your victories are so often your losses. I had the great blessing in my life is being able to talk to people. And I did an interview with a guy I didn't know, a wonderful man, a really wonderful man called Jimmy John Leotoad, who started Jimmy John's Sandwich Shop. And last spring, and I interviewed him, and I didn't know that much about the sandwich shop, and I live very far from sandwich shops, and it's just not in my region, and I didn't know that much about him. And we're talking just about politics or whatever, and he started this business in college. I don't actually think he went to college, but as a young man, he started this sandwich shop out of a garage. He never took any money, no venture money at all. He took like 20 grand from his dad, repaid it, and he works on this thing like with maximum full-bore intensity for 30 years. And then he sells it, and he sells it for like 1.8 billion. And his total investment payout was zero because he was the only investor. So he wakes up after 30 years of making sandwiches, and he gets over $1 billion. Well, that's like, you don't hear that story every day. And I said, what was that like? He goes, it was awful. Really? He goes, yeah, it was awful. You know, that's when I reached my goal that I had devoted my entire life to reaching, and things started to crumble inside me. I had no objective. I had no mission. I wasn't fighting against anything to get where I wanted to go. I was already there. And when I got there, it was just me. And it really set off a crisis inside me. And by the way, I should say, for the record, I think that crisis made him into a much deeper and happier man. But he had to go through the crisis. And he went through the crisis at exactly the moment of his victory. And he's not the only person who's told me something like that. And I myself have felt that way. You know, you really want something. It's the kind of the weird ennui you feel at the age of 8 when every last present has been opened under the tree and you're like, it's over. And like you're kind of psyched to go play with your new Spider-Man stuff, but then you're like, Christmas is done, you know? That's the moment of victory. When you're 8, victory is Christmas. Like that's all that matters. Like that is, like you've won. But in your victory, you lose a little bit. And that's always true. But thankfully, the flip side is true. So I have no idea how this is going to play out. I'm completely over my brief flirtation with pretending to predict the future. I've thrown my crystal ball away. I'm not going to read your palms. I have no idea what's coming. But I am totally certain in my heart, and I mean it, that we will look back in this moment, and if you're not even conservative, if you just think what's going on now is really wrong and really destructive to the country that you love, and imperiling, dangerous to your children and grandchildren, future generations, if you feel that way, and I think most people do, you will look back on this moment of despair and confusion. What the hell just happened? No one really knows. It's bad, we know that. We don't really know how or why. You will look back on this as the beginning of clarity. You will. Beginning of clarity. This is when I really began to understand what was happening and what I personally could do about it. I changed for the better. Suffering causes growth. That is always true, and it's true now. Thank you, and I will take your questions.
We're going to start to your right, Tucker.
All right.
To your right.
Give me a mean one to my right.
right.
Sorry, I'm very dyslexic, so I never know which is left and right. Excuse me.
Thank you, Tucker. Appreciate you being here the second year. So for us here in Maricopa County, it's been hard to express gratitude based on what the establishment class has done to we the people. Seemingly here in Maricopa County, the belly of the beast, the DNC is corrupt and the GOP is complicit. Where do we look to? Please.
You know, you, as you may have guessed, I agree with you completely. I mean, the horrifying realization is not that the other side hates you, is that your side hates you too. I mean, it's like a horror movie. It's coming from inside the house. I mean, I'm serious. And it's so destabilizing. It's one of the reasons that I've never had like grave problems, because my wife has always been on my side, like unquestioningly. But it is almost like that. It's like the people you thought were on your side betray you. That's way harder to take. It's way scarier. It's way worse than just being opposed by someone who hates you. Like, I get that. Everyone knows what an enemy is. The betrayal by a friend is bitter. It's bitter. And I feel bitter about it, not as a talk show host, but as a voter who votes Republican because I don't really have a choice. Wish I did. Don't. Especially now. What do we do about it? I mean, I don't know. This is a 501c3, so I don't think I can officially endorse prayer as an answer, but that's how I feel. I mean, really, for clarity. And it is. I mean it. I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm sure like half this room grew up in evangelical families with 8 kids. You all went to church. I grew up in La Jolla, California as an Episcopalian. So like, it's weird for me to say that, but I say it not because I think I should say it. I say it because it works. That's why I say it, actually. I mean that. And I don't think it works. I've seen it work. I interviewed this guy the other day, Gianno Caldwell, who works for Fox. Another person I didn't really know. Wonderful man. And he said to me something that I immediately came home and told my wife, and I've been thinking about it ever since. He said, I'm not going to believe in a religion that doesn't have miracles. Why would I do that? Well, I grew up in a church where miracles were absolutely banned, like super offensive, like nothing miraculous allowed. But he just made a really simple point, like, I'm busy. I don't want to be involved with anything that doesn't produce supernatural results. Amen. I absolutely believe that, and that's why I believe. But anyway, I would say this, prayer's not the only answer. I mean, I think people, secular people and people of faith, both have an obligation to engage in trying to make things better. If the road's broken, fill the potholes, And there are a lot of things that are broken. Some are very tough. It's hard to keep candidates you vote for honest once they get there. They're facing all kinds of headwinds that I'm not going to bore you with, but you can get a sense of what they are. It's overwhelming. Everybody in Washington hates democracy. That's the truth. So, of course, democracy is the one thing they never stop yammering about. We're defending democracy. Nobody hates democracy more than you do, actually. You banned a presidential candidate from speaking in public, so, like, you're not for democracy, so no mas from you. One thing we can fix, I'm sorry to say this, but, like, is the party structure itself. And I do think it's time. Like, I'm not getting involved in any of this, and I'm not getting involved in elections, as I've said 14 times tonight. I'm not good at that. But it's too corrupt. It is just too corrupt. I'm sorry. And I'm even kind of tolerant of that. I mean, I remember going to Chicago many years ago, and, the government of Chicago has always been corrupt, but I was there in a blizzard, and they got the snow off the streets in like 8 minutes. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, I'm against corruption, but look at the streets. Like, it works, actually. You want to take your 15%, I'm against it, but I'm not going to call the cops on you because you're doing your job and you're doing it well. Competence makes up for a lot. But if you're the Republican National Committee and you're handing out contracts to consultants to the tune of millions of dollars who don't actually do anything, but you're doing it because they're your friends, which is happening and has always happened, and you're bombing around on private planes with the money that, like, sweet, terrified Republican voters have sent to you from the middle of the country, and you're catering things and buying Lululemon workout gear with political contributions, and you're losing elections? No. If you win elections, well, we can talk about it. If you're losing, get out. We cannot reward incompetence. Let me just add, honestly, just think about that. Think about how insulting that is. It's such a destructive cycle, and anyone who has kids would recognize it. If your kid, like, did something, you find your kid smoking weed in your basement, you can't pretend that's okay. You can't. You hurt the kid. You hurt your child. You have to hold people, especially people you love and support, to some standard for their sake and for yours. It degrades us all when you don't. So anyway, I would, that's one thing. Fixing the RNC is not going to fix the Republican Party, but like, it can't be that hard. Let's just start there. Do I have time for one more question?
This is going to be the last question.
All right.
Hello, Tucker. My
Hey.
name is Joshua, and I'm a really big fan of your show.
Thank you.
With the 2022 Republican primary election happening soon, who do you plan to support, Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis?
Well, who am I going to support? Well, Joshua, as you've noticed, my endorsement means a lot to American voters. This is the new me, Joshua. I started to grasp this. It is relevant. I just interviewed Mike Tyson. And like, I had no interest in interviewing Mike Tyson. I didn't know anything about Mike Tyson, I remember him boxing, but that was it. And two really good friends of mine said, you don't know Mike Tyson? I was like, how would I know Mike Tyson? I host a show on Fox. Like, Mike Tyson is actually a wonderful person, a totally honest person, and really smart, and you should interview him. And so I did. I interviewed Mike Tyson. And my friends are absolutely right. He's one of the most interesting. I'm still thinking about what he said, believe it or not. And it's like, that's why life is wonderful. You're always surprised. And I was shocked by what a marvelous and good person Mike Tyson was. But one of the things that he said that I've been thinking about ever since, a week and a half ago, I said, you go out in public a lot and you're one of the most famous people in the world, and I'm sure everyone's nice to you, but some people are probably not nice. How do you feel when people criticize you? And he said, because he's extremely sincere, he said, when I feel like I'm somebody, I'm really offended by it. But when I remember I'm nobody, it's okay. And I thought, I need to be more like that. That's exactly right. I mean, let's be honest. Who cares what I think? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not endorsing anybody. I have no idea what's going to happen in the Republican primary. I spend a lot of time in Florida, and I think Ron DeSantis has done like an unbelievable job. And I mean that. I don't know DeSantis that well, but let me put it this way. People move to Florida because he's the governor. I've lived in a lot of states. I grew up in California. I've lived in D.C., Rhode Island, Arkansas. Like, I've kind of, I've lived in this country for over 50 years. I know it pretty well. And I've never lived in a state where people just like unbidden at dinner are like, I'm really, really glad we have our governor. What? I've never lived in a place where people knew who the governor was. The governor? Really? Was he here? No, I just love him. But people literally say that about Ron DeSantis where I live. It's like, what? So I'm so impressed by that. I'm so grateful that Donald Trump ran in 2016. Donald Trump completely changed my view of everything. Donald Trump is why I left Washington. And he did it in a really simple way by asking questions that no one around him could answer. He showed up and said things like, why don't we have a border? Shut up! Shut up, racist! Or my personal favorite, he's like, what's the point of NATO? And you're like, and I grew up, my dad worked for the government, and I was, had a front row seat to the Cold War. It was like being waged in my house. Like, my dad worked for the government fighting the Soviets. So like NATO was like a great thing because it kept the Soviets from invading Western Europe. But that ended in August of 1991. But I never thought about it again until 2016 when Donald Trump brought it up. Ever. What's the point of NATO? And I thought, that's a great question. What's the answer? And all my neighbors are like, shut up, racist! Shut up! And that's when I realized, oh, wait, I live in a city where nobody can defend what we're doing. And if people can't defend what they're doing, they shouldn't be doing it. It's really simple. If you can't defend what you're doing the wrong thing. If you're doing it in secret, you're doing it for a reason in secret, because you're doing the wrong thing. Secrecy abets evil. And if you have an entire system built on secrecy, where they won't release the Kennedy files after 59 years because they were involved in it, actually. And that's true. It's not speculation. Then you've got a really rotten system. And who I think I'm pretty observant, I wouldn't have known any of that until Trump showed up. And I started asking these kind of like autistic, simple questions, like, why are we doing it that way? Shut up, racist! And it's exposed the whole thing, and I'm so grateful to have seen that. And I should also add, since why not, I actually love Donald Trump as a guy. And I know Trump. I've known Trump for 20 years because I work in the media, you know. And I just have always gotten along with him. And I think he's one of the funniest people I've ever talked to in my life. I think he's got this unbelievable life force to him. Talking to Trump, especially when it's not an interview, you don't actually want to interview Trump. That's a nightmare because you can't get him to answer any questions. Because it's the Trump train, you can get on or off, but you can't steer it. Yeah, don't ever interview Trump. But talking to Trump is one of the great joys, one of the great animal joys of life, because he exudes this kind of animal joy. And I love that, and I do. And the characterizations of Trump as like this force of evil, it's like, no, that's Liz Cheney. I'm sorry, that's not. Like, what are you even talking about? I mean, I think, and I've said it, I mean, I criticize my own children, and they're not allowed to criticize me. Just kidding. But I think there are plenty of things to criticize about Trump. I mean, he's a human being, but the idea that he's like this personally some monster is like absurd. It's like it's just another lie. They always tell the opposite of the truth. Trump is like totally charming and engaging and fun and interesting. And the last thing I'll say about Trump that I really love is that his insights into people, which are always expressed in this, because I use words for a living, so I notice how people express things. Trump expresses himself in this way that's like completely original. But his insights into people are like, they're like unbelievable. Now, I don't think he's that great at hiring, just being honest, to put it mildly, but into other people, like, what do you think of so-and-so? And Trump will sum them up perfectly. World leaders, that's who this person is. It's like, it's truly a gift. So there's so much I like about Trump, and fundamentally I agree with him, you know, on the big things, on immigration, foreign policy, I strongly agree with him. So like, you know, thank heaven I don't have to think through how this is going to end. I mean, at this point, it does seem like two like forces moving toward one another at high speed. And how can that go well? And the answer is, I have no idea. I have no idea what's going to happen. There was like a period of a couple weeks where I was like, I'm in the news business. I got to find out how this movie's going to end. And then I realized, especially after the midterms, no idea. It's a cliffhanger. And I'm just happy to report on it day to day. I don't have to have official feelings on it or tell people you should vote for this person or that person. Like, I see a million sides of it, and I think it'll work out a little better than, I know every person in this room is terrified of some horribly destructive primary that hobbles the party and lets, 83-year-old Joe Biden continue to continue to allow Barack Obama to actually run the country. And that is a nightmare scenario, but I don't think it's assured. Last thing I'll say, if you had, again, I've done this since 1991, so you'd think I'd be better at predicting things. But if you had said to me, well, actually, I'll tell you, this is actually a true story. I'm sitting in the car at some point going somewhere in 2015, and Trump calls me. I'll never forget this moment. And he calls me and he goes, I've got an announcement. I think I'm going to kind of surprise you. And I was like, yeah, right. You're running for president. Right, okay. Because I had seen this before in 2000. That's how old I am. He ran for president to sell a book or whatever. And I started laughing. And I'm like, you got another book coming out? And he's like, and he goes, no, actually, I'm serious. I think I'm going to surprise you. And he was so different from, I talked to him a lot. I've never heard him like this. And at this point, he's a media figure. He just works at NBC, where I used to work. Like, he's in the world that I live in. But I don't think of him as like a real presidential candidate. But there was something in his voice that was so different that I actually wrote it down on my little calendar thing on my iPhone. Donald Trump calls and says he's going to run for president. I took it seriously. But the amazing thing is that until that moment, I would have bet my house that would have been impossible. Like, I did not see it coming at all. I didn't see it coming. And that event completely changed American politics forever, for good and bad. But it changed it forever. That was a transformative event. And I didn't predict it. So we are 2 years out, 2 years minus 1 month out from the presidential election. So I am completely comfortable putting my total ignorance on full and florid display and telling you I have no freaking idea, but I can't wait to see it. Thank you.
All right, everybody, what an opening session, huh? It was incredible. All right, in just a couple minutes, you got to be back in here for incredible country concerts tonight. So you guys got to be tonight. It's going to be incredible. In just about 15 minutes, the concerts are going to start. Chase Rice, Riley Green, it's going to be incredible. So make sure you guys are here. And secondly, if you want to support Turning Point USA in any way whatsoever for a gift of any amount, either online or in person, if you guys go to the booths, a gift of any amount will get you my book, The College Scam. So if you guys want to support this conference or the work we're doing, you guys can do it out there. And please support our exhibitors, guys. For you watching online, you can go to tpusa.com. We'll see you guys in a couple minutes for some pretty amazing concerts. God bless you guys.